Welcome to your Huddle South Central's Let's Listen podcast. Here we're dedicated to discussing mental health topics openly and honestly. Before we begin, we want to remind you that the information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of Huddle South Central. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, mental health research and understanding are always changing, and information shared in this podcast may become outdated over time. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health issues, we encourage you to seek help from a qualified mental health professional. Please don't disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast. By tuning in to Let's Listen, you agree that we will not be held responsible for any actions taken based on the information provided. Always consult with a mental health professional or healthcare provider for specific advice related to your individual situation. We appreciate you listening and for taking care of your mental health.
Physical and mental health are often viewed as separate issues, but they're often connected. The bottom line is that the difference between physical and mental illness is artificial. Both are the result of the relationship between genetic, biological, cultural, and experiential factors. When we're stressed, it hurts our physical health, and when our body is injured, it impacts our mental state. In both cases, we need to look at the entirety of the situation to help a person recover. Doing this and anything like it is pretending that a coin only has one side. Accepting that mental distress and physical discomfort are a part of the human experience is what we need to do to be able to cope in a long-lasting way and reduce the stigma that we have around mental health issues. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Let's Listen podcast. My name is Mirella. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Youth Hub Coordinator at Huddle South Central. And joining us today, we have
Hayden. My pronouns are he, him.
And Em, I go by he, they pronouns.
Welcome, folks. Thank you for being here with us today. So, today we're talking about the relation between physical health and mental health. So, we're ready to listen.
You want me to go first? You're
It's
looking
up
at
to
me.
you. This is my fourth podcast, so it's up to you.
Oh, it's a very, very big topic for me because I feel like the past few years, that's just been kind of like just an adventure and journey, learning. I don't know. It's like my body's just mad at me, and it's like when I don't, when I invalidate whatever is going on in my life, or if I even attempt to do so, it like I experience like physical pain, or like things will manifest in my body that just kind of like they don't really they don't make it, just kind of happens out of the blue, and I can't really find like a physical explanation for it. But yeah, so lately, the past while, I've been noticing that whenever I have like traumatic thoughts or things in my life that come up that trigger traumatic memories, I'll experience like a sharp shooting pain, usually in my lower back. And thankfully, I usually go to Oak Table there, and there's a chiropractor there who's been extremely helpful, and I'm really glad that I've been able to get access to him and the care there. But yeah, he told me that I have, I believe, I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce it right, but myofascial pain syndrome. And so basically, when you're stressed out, you tense up, and then you get like a sharp shooting pain, and it can last like for me, it lasts sometimes for like a little over a week, but it feels really, it could range in like the intensity as well. Sometimes it's like a level like 10 out of 10 pain where I feel like I'm about to collapse, and other times it lingers and then it builds up. But yeah, I notice it always happens whenever I'm thinking about trauma, or when trauma comes up, and I don't really have control over it. Like if I'm out and about, there was a time where I saw something that brought up trauma, and also just like that, I just had like a shooting pain in my back, and it was really bad and very, very frustrating. And it's not fun because it's like usually you could kind of foresee when like things are in your body are like gonna happen, like how your mental health, like it has like a decline slowly, but like I'll be 100% fine, and then all of a sudden something will like bring up trauma, or I'll be thinking about something, or something will come up, and it's like I lose all control as to like the pain coming about. And yeah, and then I guess another thing that has happened to me too is like when I get really stressed, I've had migraine auras, which basically they don't always have a migraine, but usually it has happened where I've had a migraine before, usually mixed with them. I think one time there was no migraine. But anyways, it basically for up to half an hour, like max half an hour, sometimes like 15 minutes or so, I'll go temporarily blind. And it's kind of like, for me personally, it's like a kaleidoscope. Everything that's like around me just kind of like breaks off into fragments, and I can't see it. And it's only ever happened when I'm like really, really, really stressed for long periods of time. And yeah, so it's kind of, and as like inconvenient as like these pains and things that have happened to me, at the same time, it also kind of like validates my pain, because I've struggled a lot with that. As like a lot of people, they I've just internalized a lot of invalidation of like when I'm going through things, because I mean you can't see them, but then my body's just like making it so physical that I can't not, like I can't ignore it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's weird, just like forced validation by my body. So it's like kind of love and hate it at the same time, in a sense, because it's like yeah, it's like it's validation. It's like my body's like, no, you can't block this. This is like really, this is like a thing you can't block out, and it's real. And yeah.
That's so true though. Thank you for sharing that. It's you know, there's such a stigma around what you can't see, especially with mental health, that if you're struggling with depression or anxiousness or trauma or grief, that if, you know, you walked around with a broken arm, people would offer you like aid and they would check to see how you were doing. And even if you had a smile on your face, they would still know that you were in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And with mental health, people, as a society, we don't always put that same importance on that, and we should,
If
you
you don't
know.
see it, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, yeah. But it so does, right? So
Yeah.
how do we combat that? How do we bring light to that?
And I think that mental health being tied to physical health has become even more apparent throughout and the end of the pandemic. Let's
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. No more pandemic, please. Being quarantined, so many people had to come up with ways to keep moving their bodies and keep doing what they were normally doing within the confines of four walls. I know for me, I didn't get that exercise, and that can be really daunting on mental health as well. Obviously, there's the aspect of having dysmorphia and you know, not being happy with what you look and see in the mirror, but just physical health in general. Running and exercising releases so many endorphins and positive chemicals that your brain and your body need, that it's difficult to stop doing those things even if the world needs it and requires it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I also have frustration too with like that myofascial pain syndrome, because it's like there, whenever I've had it happen where I had like that shooting pain in my back, where sometimes it feels like I have to collapse, kind of thing. Well, not have to. That's like more like I don't have a choice. I almost feel like I'm about to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll be really fit. Like the last time I had a really bad, I don't know if you would want to say episode, but when it was really bad last time, it was actually later on in the day after I had just seen the chiropractor, which also kind of let me know that like, well, it's really just dependent on what you're thinking about and your traumas coming up. That is the biggest controlling factor. You can't really gauge it on how you are in the physical moment, because like the first time it happened, when it was the worst actually as well, it was like I was walking and running, well, procrastinate running, you know, like catching the bus once in a while. But like, I don't know, I was doing lots of walking, like 6 hours daily at the time, doing a lot. I was very physical at the time. It was like summer, it was nice out and everything. And I just been thinking about something really heavy, and like something was on my mind. And when I went to go tie my shoes, I just had a shooting pain. For a while, I thought it was sciatica, but now I'm like figured out that like with my chiropractor, it's yeah, myofascial pain syndrome. And yeah, it's just frustrating, just not
Mm-hmm.
knowing, not being able to predict, and having to accept that loss of like an assurance of like sometimes I won't have control over my body, and accepting that it's very, very difficult. But working through it, I guess it tells you to live in the moment and not stress about overthinking, taking, yeah, but like, I mean, yeah, physical health, like doing exercise definitely helps. But yeah, sometimes I get frustrated because it's like, it makes me feel like nothing can prevent it, and that I really just have to deal with my traumas kind of thing.
Yeah, it just shows how connected they are. We also see with mental illness that sometimes it can make people want to have unhealthy behaviors as well. So a poor diet or lack of exercise or maybe even using substances or something that maybe doesn't have the best health outcomes too, right? So what do you guys think that are some of the ways that we can share with other youth like yourselves that are positive ways to cope with physical and mental health?
I think the difficulty is that because there's so much stigma around it, that talking about it just isn't enough. One of the big issues that we see is, you know, going through a depressive episode. I don't want to get up. I don't want to move my body. I don't want to be healthy. I have no desire for those things. And there's a lot of shame towards that too. There's not that level of support for it, rather the shame of, oh, you're lazy, oh, you're useless, you're not being proactive, you're not being productive, you're not worth anything to society as a whole. There's a lot of, I find in Western culture, from my experience, there's a lot of expectation of going and not stopping. And one thing that was really, really hard for me going through a depressive episode and needing to put the brakes on life was life doesn't stop. So it was, there was all these things going on around me. My friends were graduating. My my siblings were doing their own thing. I had sports. I was
Pressure. Yeah.
There's so much pressure, and to stop and accept that no, I cannot keep going at that pace is hard on its own when you don't want to be left behind. But then to top it off with that shame and that you know that stigma around being lazy and being useless is really, really detrimental, because it just puts you further into the cycle of depression.
And what I think is that if you feel like that, and I know I've felt like that does everybody feel like that? And could we collectively all just be kinder to ourselves, but also like to each other, right? And that we go through things at different times and we have different milestones, and our health, our physical or mental health or spiritual health it's all part of a journey. Like, why I agree with talking just always isn't, it might not be enough, but to action that, to show up for your friends, to show up for yourself, I think that's part of what we need to do moving forward.
I'm trying to think of what I have thoughts. It's just gathering them.
That's
I
okay.
mean, you asked about what do we do, right? Like, what do we do to help us get through our day to day? Kind of have some embarrassment to it, but it's honestly like, it's like what's the word? I have this new method that I do for like to-do lists. Because when I write down a to-do list, for me, it's like I get like upset at myself at the end of the day when there's things I haven't completed on my to-do list. It makes me feel worse. So to-do lists, I always just kind of avoid them because it just made me feel worse at the end of the day, even though it helped me like look at what I have to do, and sometimes they'd help. So I actually found a better strategy for myself, and it may sound like childish, but it works for me, and it could also work for others. I call it the sticker method. So I got like this book of, you could get stickers for cheap at Dollarama, and like just like a notebook or whatever, even just like lined paper, and I'll write down what I need to do, even like the bare basics, like sometimes, brushing my teeth could be extremely difficult. And every time I do a task, I put a sticker down, and at the end of the day, you see all the stickers. Mind you, I mean, some days there might not be as many, but you're gonna like your eyes are like gonna get drawn more towards like the stickers and all the things that you've completed, and maybe even putting stickers down for like when you have like positive things happen throughout the day, like maybe you got a compliment, or you went and you did something really fun, and just like capturing it all in a book, and it just makes it more fun and satisfying when you're like putting stickers down. And then at the end of the day, I count all the stickers, and like when I reach 100 stickers, like every increment of 100, I'll like maybe reward myself with something.
Focusing on the positive instead of the negative.
Yeah, I
Well,
love that.
yeah, but also you get like onto this like it's like a competition with yourself. I don't know. I have ADHD as well, so it helps me. It's kind of it's like you're on a roll. For me,
Yeah.
I always like I have this analogy for my energy. I call it like a shopping cart energy kind of thing. For like if the how I describe it is when like a shopping cart is full, and someone tells you, okay, you gotta either like push it for. I don't know if you've ever heard of where someone says like, oh, just do like 5 minutes of it instead of like half an hour of doing it. For me, 5 minutes is either it's to be honest even maybe even like harder than 30 minutes of doing something, because for me when it's starting something is the hardest thing, and I roll on momentum, and when I get my momentum going, then it just I zoom through it. It's
You can
harder to
clean the
stop
whole
car.
house
Yeah.
more than just the
Yeah,
dishes.
exactly. And I feel more
Yeah.
energized at the end of it too, because I'm like, oh, look at this, I'm on this rush, and it's kind of like, yeah, and I guess like the sticker method helps me like get my even like if it's one task, sometimes even like if you have to go pee, sometimes getting up that just little bit of energy going through like motions can like help you get like a whole bunch of stuff done, and you don't even know it because you don't know when you're gonna have that like momentum of that cart just full on rolling. But the thing is, at the end of the day, you always have to stop, so you always have to pick up your momentum, or even like not even like when you go to sleep, but like if I sit down, I'll like sometimes I'll lose all my energy. But sometimes if I look back at my to-do list with my stickers and everything, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try and push for this thing, and then I'll keep it going. And just another thing too of like when things get really dark or very overwhelming, just sometimes thinking about things is more unhealthy and more draining. So my slogan is like, every step is a step. There's never truly a step backwards. Like, even if you end up in a so-called same situation as you were previously, you're not in the same situation because you have knowledge from like in the past what you did, and you're just you have your memory from like that same situation from previously, so you have something different added to that situation. You're never going back in time, you're always moving forward. And I kind of look at things too, like addictions or other things too, as in like when you're walking. I know in Winnipeg we got lots of snow, so when there's like that path that's like beaten down by everybody, and then sometimes you like I've had like previous, for example, like chronic suicidality, so I know that in my brain there's like a path that's like trodden down on with that path there. But I've been really working hard towards getting off that path and making a new one. And the more it's like
The more you walk across it, the easier it is to choose that path every
well,
time.
yeah, but like also let's say we get off that path and we make a new one, and you fall back onto that old beaten path, and of course it's that one's you kind of get stuck into it because you already made grooves previously. But
The grooves from that new path haven't gone away. They're still there.
yes, they're still there. It's just kind of like when you're not necessarily walking straight, you could be walking diagonally and like kind of like swishing around like that. Zigzag, yeah, and just reinforcing as much as you can. Not necessarily looking at things in a black and white manner, because I don't feel like that's healthy. It's like every little bit into a direction is still kind of getting you into that direction.
The whole world is shades of gray.
Indeed.
There's this teaching that grandmother, one of the elders in our community, her name is Charlotte Nolan, once shared with me, where if you look at an eagle feather, you'll see the spine of the feather is very straight, but the little like pieces that are coming off that make the whole feather are your journey. So when you, on one side, it's shorter, it's thicker, and on the other, it's softer and longer. And sometimes there's little breaks in it, and sometimes there's chunks out of it, and sometimes they're a little bit discolored, and sometimes and as you follow that thread, as you follow that journey down the spine, you learn about the life of that ancestor, and it's symbolic that it's like our life. So we don't just walk straight and we get it right all the time, and with mental health, like, things happen. People pass away, or trauma experiences, like there's things that like make us who we are. So we have to honor all of that. And sometimes it's harder than other times, but it doesn't discredit the times that we have a little more stickers in our book than others.
Yeah.
That's okay.
But going back to the sticker method, that's a great example
Yeah, I love it.
of how to get your brain and body working together when it comes to physical and mental health. Like,
Yeah.
know what you need to do to make sure that you are getting both your mental health spoons taken care of and your physical spoons taken care of.
And to be kind to yourself. Like,
Mhm.
if you had just one sticker at the end of the day and it was from brushing your teeth, that's better than nothing. That's not nothing. That's huge. You know,
That's
so
a sticker.
that's a
Yeah.
sticker. It's this
Yeah.
like representation of how you're out there killing it.
Yeah. I think of it like, honestly, since I've started doing that method, I feel like my toothbrushing has gotten like significantly better than previously before. And I was like, I've definitely see an impact. It might not like solve all my like problems, or all the tasks that I need to get done are not necessarily all completed. Mostly because I also set the bar really high for myself too. But at the same time, I know that this method has helped me do a lot more than I would have without it. And so for me, that's helpful. Yeah.
I know for me, on the other, maybe not the flip side, but on another hand, for me, is emotional regulation and physical health. For me, I use my physical health and running and practicing different martial arts as a way to cope with emotions that I can't normally cope with. That's a really big thing for me. To have that taken away would not only be detrimental to my physical health, but also to my mental health. Because if I'm not running, then I'm not coping. If I'm not coping, then I'm, in my bed, curled in a ball crying.
Do you think when you move your body that it makes things clearer in your mind? Is that what is that what the coping does for you, or?
I think for me, as someone who struggles with an anxiety disorder, my head can be kind of like a ball of yarn that's been knotted, or like an electrical cord that's been knotted, right? You pull in one area and it tightens in two others, and you pull in those areas, and it's very messy and tangled. When I run, it gets easier to see the cord and where the strand is going, and it's easier to sort through the thoughts because they're not all jumbled up and trying to come at me at 110 miles an hour all at once. Just being able to run allows me to an extent, only have the focusing capabilities to look at one chunk of it at a time. Because otherwise, I try and see all of it, and that can be really daunting. Like, so daunting. I've had multiple times where, I've been angry, and trying to sort through those emotions is just not possible. But running has allowed me to examine them, okay, I'm angry. Why am I angry? This is why I'm angry. Why do I feel like I want to, punch a wall? How can I resolve that? What could I possibly say that changes the scenario? How does the scenario change depending on my decisions? And by the end of my run, I'm like, I don't feel the need to punch anybody because my muscles have strained like they did punch somebody. Like, I don't have a need to be that aggressive and that angry because I get that out through my fitness and through my physical health.
Yeah, that's a great way to cope with how you're feeling, and how you were saying, Hayden, that when your mental health triggers your physical health, it's a great way to the opposite when you're like to combat your mental health with your physical health and take that power back, right?
They're so intertwined. There's there's research done, and the topic is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's the idea that our needs are kind of like a pyramid, where you have your physical needs at the bottom, things like breathing, eating, drinking, things that you need to survive, and then as you go up, your needs become less physical and more social and spiritual and mental. I find that, and not just me, but many people find that that's a very difficult way to describe needs, because I mean, from my personal experience, when I was depressed and in a depressive episode, I was not focused on my physical needs first. I was focused on the mental health trauma that I was going for. I could not take care of my physical needs first because I was far too focused on the mental health. But based off of the hierarchies diagram, mental health should be very, very close to the top, far away from the first need. So there's this really intriguing dynamic where it's not so simple. Everything is deeply intertwined in each other.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot have one without the other. Everything is balanced in life, and that's a really good example of it, is that you cannot have, your mental health have, you cannot have a positive mental health image if you cannot also find peace and comfort in your physical health as well, and vice versa.
That's so true.
At the most difficult part with I struggle with the physical health aspect because I'm always fatigued, and getting the motivation to do that takes a ton. So for me, I guess what helps a lot is with my mental health is planning things with my friends, or sometimes even being very spontaneous with friends, like, hey, do you want to go and do this thing with me, just in the moment. It also kind of helps holding accountability too, to some extent, because let's say you're feeling I don't really feel like doing this, but then sometimes it could also help you with well, this person's going, so I'm going to go to, and then after you feel better. I mean, it could also vary too, because sometimes you could be doing too much. I guess too much people pleasing is also bad too,
Yeah, balance is key.
Balance
Yeah.
yeah. And I think for me too, I'm really good at awareness of my emotions. One that I watch out for is especially is when I start to get irritable around other people. Usually for me, I've noticed that when I look into it, I'm like, hey, you know what? That's just me having high expectations for myself. For example, wanting to do things for another person and feeling irritable around that person because I really want to do this thing around that other person, but it's just something that I've usually put onto myself that they didn't place onto me. And watching out for things like that for me helps a lot.
Yeah.
Baths. Baths for me also. Those are
Baths.
really good. When you're really exhausted or you don't have enough motivation to run, having baths, or singing in the shower too. That's another fun one. And then actually, I remember when I went homeless, or when I got kicked out, what helped me when everything was crisis mode was I ended up trading massages with a friend at the time. And for me personally, it's because it's so focused on present moment and touch and feeling, and you're focusing on the knots in the muscles. For me, that's what brought me to that mindfulness state, and it was the one time where I actually had a moment of I was relaxed. And yeah, so for me, massages are one of my favorite self-care things. Wish I could get them done more on me, usually
Yeah.
I'm the one giving massage, but even giving a friend massage for me is, it helps me with my mindfulness, because I'm focusing on the moment and sense of touch. For me, that's how I get really brought into the mindfulness kind of present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people don't realize how uptight we keep ourselves outside of
Yeah.
what we consider our safe spaces. I have not had an experience being homeless, but I'd love to hear from you, just the difference in being outside. I tense up, and then coming home and not tensing. So the idea of not being able to go to quote unquote home and be able to release that tension,
Like a safe space.
yeah.
For me, I was very, very lucky. I wasn't homeless for too long. I got into the rest program really quickly, because I guess that's the thing too. It's when things get really, really bad, or whenever there's a negative thing, I always try to figure out what I'm taking from it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was what happened was good, or that there was a good thing out of it, but it could be taking a lesson from something. But in that case, things had gotten so bad that I was able to get access to supports that I needed to get my own personal space. And there was a whole bunch of other things that came along with that were also negative. But I honestly, I was able to get, I was able to become more independent, and that was super liberating. Sorry, what was the question again?
I was just wondering if you noticed the difference between being able to release and
Oh yeah,
let
safe
go
space.
of that tension
Yeah.
outside of a safe space during that time.
Yeah, so that was that massage that I had with that friend. That was the one time I had that nice release. But otherwise, I think when I was dealing with that homelessness for that short while, it was interesting because like I ended up in transitional health. Like yeah, there was like that tenseness for a long while because I was like figuring out like survival needs and everything. Food. It was like the one of the times where I was like, oh shoot, like I really have to worry about food and everything. And there's like so many layers. And I went into like survival mode. It was weird because I had like a lot of chronic suicidality. But then when I went into like survival mode, it helped me block it out because I was just so overwhelmed to even think about all of that. Ironically, but I remember when when I was in transitional housing, I had to deal with like pests and like just there was a lot of things that kind of I don't know, just like being on my own, it made me feel like I was more in a safe space, not necessarily outside. Like once I got into like transitional housing, that's when I was able to like feel that safety. And I think like when I had that apartment, and even though there was like lots of pests and things going on, it just made me feel so safe to just be in my own energy and not have to worry about other people's energies affecting my energy. And that was really life changing for me, as well as like gaining independence. I know like as youth, when you're stuck having to live with like other people or family, especially like when you're under 18, it's a big struggle because like yeah, you have to stay there. But the nice thing is it's not forever. And once you're 18 or able to like live on your own, it's so liberating. Like I know for me, like sometimes there's like whenever someone has a conflict in the house, it's like all eggshells and it's so uncomfortable. But when you get your own space, it's like the best thing ever because you have so much more gratitude for that space and you just feel so way more recharged. It's like you couldn't recharge before, but now you can. Yeah. And like when you have a conflict, for example, with like a family member or like a friend or whatever, you don't have to stay in that space. You could get up and leave, and that's like one of my favorite things of adulthood. I mean,
I was
there's lots
gonna
of other
say
things that come along with, but yeah,
boundaries and
yeah,
autonomy. Yeah,
yeah.
Don't know what those
definitely.
things are yet.
When you discover that power for yourself, or when you gain that power, oh, it's like the huge, like the biggest weight lifted off
It's
ever.
liberating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the other, or maybe not on the other side because it's so intertangled, but another viewpoint of the issue is, you know, socially there's this ideology of, the models and society's expectations of like body views, which can tie into mental health as well, eating versus not eating and how that affects your mental health. I know for me it's really tough not having what I think would be the ideal body type for me and struggling to remember to eat. You need to eat, but you really, really don't want to eat. And then also like when I do, I'm by surrounded by yummy, yummy things, and it's like, well, I'd love to have some, but I also want to achieve a goal that is not, I can't have both. And trying to find the balance in that for me is really hard.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like I feel like that's a very common positioning to have. Like, how do you stay in balance with your mental health, your physical health, eating, exercising, people pleasing?
There's so many.
There's just so many that are all intertwined with our physical and mental health.
And then you bring the family and other people into the picture, and they're,
Yeah.
you're looking a little chunky today, or you're thinning out. It's like, please don't remind me that I have problems in that area. Like,
I do feel like as a whole we've gotten like a little bit better with trying to not say like comment on people's bodies or comment whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah.
Like, not to say this doesn't happen in our families at Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, but like I think overall I would say a majority of us try and make an effort to not comment on people's bodies or make assumptions about their sex or their gender or their identity or just anything, their race, anything, like or their race, their like, I think if we want to know, we should ask, but also sometimes there's really not a place for us to ask. If people want to tell us, they will. And if they don't, it's not for us to ask, right?
Well,
So,
I think a big difficulty is like I can look at anybody and go, doesn't matter what they look like.
mhm.
But for myself, I'm so, like you were saying earlier about being hard on yourself and having those expectations of yourself. I just can't be satisfied with my own achievements and my own expectations of myself. And so it's, even though we won't outwardly say it to others, we still do it to ourselves, which is the difficult part of this transition for society is, not just being kinder to others, but being kinder to ourselves.
Do either of you practice like positive affirmations daily or ever?
Not daily, but I do it when I have really, really low parts in my days.
I find I have to be. It depends on like my headspace because I feel like there's a time and place for it because sometimes you're in a space where a place where you cannot you're not able to hear the positives. Like it can make it feel like when you're in such a dark space. Sometimes you have to. Well, you could like what's the word? Hearing the positives can feel invalidating and just make you more irritated. So for me, gratitude, I could feel it now because I'm in a better spot. But I know previously that whenever someone would bring it up, it would make me really irritable and it would make me feel worse. And there's like a time and place, like a balance, kind of like positive and negative. Like so, there's the thing as toxic positivity,
Yeah.
and that's the thing I
Yes.
can't stand. There's like a balance for both. And honestly, I'd rather. I remember I went on a French exchange, and the family I was with, they were kind of leaning a little bit more to the toxic positive side, and they called me out for being someone who complains a lot. And I realized, you know what? Yeah, my family does complain, but then I'm like, I'd rather be with a family that complains more than is toxic positive, because at least I feel heard whenever I'm having things that are upsetting. And when I'm feeling really upset about something, it feels like it's being blocked out for me. And validation is such a very that's like my biggest button that like you don't push that button, it upsets me severely. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but like I think like when I mean I've been privileged with like not having to go through like long-term homelessness, but I've also dealt with like a lot of unstable housing and sleep deprivation too, because that like caused that. But like basically, I was living in a place where my throat closed up on me because there was like I don't know mice or mold or something. There's just lots of housing instability, and I moved like 4 or 5ish times that like in 1 year span, including like being kicked out and whatever, which is complicated. But anyways, what I noticed is I went into this like beyond burnout stage. It's like you got your energy reservoir and then you go into like the negatives afterwards, and it's super scary because you just change as like a completely different person. You get like the most irritable place you could ever be, at least for me. And you just it's so scary because you can become a person that you don't even recognize, and you're just very snappy, and it's like you go into that survival defense mode, and it's just a very uncomfortable and upsetting, like not a fun place to be in. And I feel like a lot of people who are homeless or going through that instability and everything like that, I feel like that's like a huge reason as to why sometimes they could like lash out at other people and people get stigma because of that. And I feel like I wish people would. I mean, I don't want people to go through that experience, but it's like you kind of don't understand until you experience that. Such a like you have no self control over yourself because you're so beyond burnt out, and it's very scary. And it's sad when I see people like going through that because I understand like when I was there in this in a sense in some way, not necessarily fully, because I mean everyone has their own different experiences, and I want to acknowledge that I haven't like gone through long term homelessness, thankfully, but
But
yeah.
you have empathy for it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I feel that, and it's like whenever I see someone, I'm like, oh, that really sucks, and like it's like yeah, it's part of me as well gets like irritable because like well they're doing whatever malicious thing they're doing, but I could understand where it's coming from, and it makes me sad a little bit, you know. But I guess like yeah, when I was in that state, it was for a long time. It took for me to like get back to my normal for myself, like what like I wasn't heavily irritable.
Like self-regulate
Yeah,
back to a place where
yeah,
you feel is
yeah.
more you.
Yeah, and even
Yeah.
still, it's like when there's certain things that can like bring me back to that kind of like scratching a scar or like going, something jabs me in the wrong way in my life or something comes up, it can like irritate that a bit, and then I could feel it come out a little bit, and I feel like that's what a lot of people with trauma deal with, is like
The triggers.
triggers and like survival mode, just being so stuck in it. And another thing too is I don't believe in like invalidating people's like depressive states and everything. I also believe though too in like there's different levels of depression, different intensities, and I find it very frustrating too when it's like some people will think that you're at like maybe they're the most that they've experienced for pain is, I don't know, we'll say, I like to give the analogy of like video game, like maybe they've experienced level 39 depression and then they're like, oh, I know what you're going through, but you're at like a level
870.
319,
Yeah.
and they're like,
It's like I understand
yeah,
that you get the empathy, but it's not to the same. You don't fully understand because everybody is different. Like
yeah,
I think that's
mhm.
the difference, even like with the physical and mental health,
Yes.
because I couldn't even explain to you really how I'm feeling, even
But
though I'm feeling it. Like,
Yeah.
right? So how could you possibly
But there's a
understand,
difference
right?
between a gash and a small
Amputated.
cut. Yeah, and an
Yeah,
amputation.
yeah,
Like
Totally.
we understand those degrees, whereas mental health is so much harder to explain.
Yes.
Mhm.
I've had a lot of experiences with the lack of understanding on my side in different areas. For me, having a panic attack, and one of my biggest pet peeves is somebody coming up and just breathe.
Oh my
It's
god,
like,
for me that actually triggers my
yeah,
anxiety
I
attacks,
I
ironically.
genuinely, I'm like, okay,
Uh,
I understand that I need to breathe. I physically am incapable of breathing right now. Like, give me a minute.
Mhm.
And it's like, until you've had those reactions, you genuinely don't understand it. And even once you have had those reactions, you genuinely don't understand it.
And for one person, that could be helpful.
Mhm.
And for the next,
Absolutely
it could be
not.
very detrimental. Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Want me to go? Sorry.
I have one of my things when I get really, really anxious. I have it. People always talk about the fight, flight, or freeze responses, and most people understand the idea of fight or flight, but I don't think a lot of people get just how severe the freeze can be. It's not just like your mind is running through a million scenarios, so you're not moving. I've had it before where the cortisol, the stress hormone in my body, I'm not moving whatsoever, and there's so much of cortisol in my body that I physically can't move my joints. My joints lock up. I can't move, and that in itself is its own panic attack inducing thing. So, I'll have panic attack on panic attack on panic attack over and over again, just cascading onto each other because I'm stuck in that position where I can't get my body to do what I want. That's another great example of physical and mental health intertwining. When you can't control something, with mental health, I find that it's really important to be able to control some kind of aspect of your life. And when the most important thing, in my opinion, your body and your ability to move, is taken away from you or unaccessible, that for me worsens my mental health. I need to have access to that freedom to move my body, even if it's just a little bit of a movement. To have that removed just worsens the thought process that I'm going through.
I just want to touch on that a little bit. So, and like when we, like that's okay. Well, you can go. That's okay. I can wait. It's
Sorry,
not.
my ADHD slipped up.
That's
I remembered
okay.
what it was. Oh gosh, now I'm forgetting it. Okay, I'm trying to remember. It was intensities. We were talking about intensities.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say for me when because I feel like like as you mentioned, sometimes it helps to say like, oh yeah, I get where you're coming from, and sometimes you could share that experience together, and it's helpful. For me, how I like to go about that way of like connecting with a person when they're going through a hard time is like say like I'm like I haven't gone through like acknowledging that I'm not in their situation because they've lived a completely different life than me, or maybe they have similarities, but there's always something different. And acknowledge like, oh, I'm not you, have not lived your life or anything, and acknowledging that what I experienced may not have been the same, but also offering to share a story about a situation that I found has some similarities to theirs, and also like asking if like what's the word? See, like acknowledging it to what's the word? Maybe like asking them if it's helpful to share
Like
as
a frame of reference.
yeah, and be like, I don't know if this is helpful. Tell me if it's not too, but I went through this experience. This is what helped me, or I've experienced this emotion or this thing that happened. And sometimes it can really, or even like sharing acknowledges, like sometimes it makes like connections with other people in my life. Like my shopping cart energy, a lot of people are like, yeah, that's the one. Or like life being a video game too is another one.
Well, just asking if
yeah.
that is close to what they're, or
Mm-hmm.
similar to what they're experiencing, so that you can get an idea
Yeah.
of the level of empathy that you can give out and
Yeah.
then send out into the world.
It's also okay to sometimes not understand what
exactly.
people are going
Yeah.
through and still just hold space
Mhm.
for them, even if you've never had an experience that is anything like what they're going through, and just simply sitting with them, or
Being a sturdy sounding board.
just listening, being like a ear, or just we're gonna sit in silence and we're gonna do whatever you need in this moment. Like, I can be a distraction, or I can be a, like, anything. Like, sometimes that's all you can do too, right? Because we all have such vast experiences in life.
Yeah, what I've been learning too is I struggle with accepting when I can't help others, but I've been realizing more so too that like sometimes I think like people struggle to sit with the discomfort of like when someone's sharing something and they can't do anything about it, but sometimes you're being really helpful, not saying anything and just listening,
Mm-hmm.
asking the person like what has helped them or what that you could do to help, and sometimes it's giving them more space, or maybe counseling an activity, or maybe it's like reinforcing an activity. It depends. Everybody's different. Everything's changing, all the time. And also being gentle with yourself too, because sometimes it's especially like I notice like when you have mental illness, it's easier to connect with people and friends who have other like mental illness as well,
Mm-hmm.
and struggles. And a lot of the time you, maybe your friends have a tendency to have like maybe deal with a lot more chronic suicidality, and you get like really drained. It's okay to like also respect your boundaries too, and maybe like accept sometimes when you can't help them or that you referred them to another person.
It's also important to remember that the person that's sharing, or if you're the one sharing, that it takes a lot of bravery to just do that and to voice it out loud. The stigma with mental health is that whatever you're going through, that you should be strong enough to not let it affect you, which is just so far from the truth, because it's a spectrum. Everybody lives with mental health. Some days it's a little stronger, more positive, better than others. Some days it's not. But the notion that I can share what's going on with me, and that I feel like you're a safe person to do that, that's brave. So just holding space for them is all you can do sometimes.
Well, and the stigma around, dealing with it by yourself is so absurd, because if you were to think about it in a physical health sense, it's like, yeah, you need to perform your own surgery.
Mm-hmm. Totally. But that's the way
No
that we
anesthesia.
that's the way that sometimes we look at mental health, is like, well, just walk it off, figure it out. Like, well, that's not, like,
It's so much more complex.
if you go to
than
a
that.
counselor, you're a weak like, like, there's all these stigmas that are so opposite to what it takes. A very strong person to say, yeah, I need help with this, or yeah, I'm ready to talk about this, or like, I have questions, or why do I feel like this, like, and do that introspective work. It takes a very strong-willed person, a very brave person to do that.
There's also the stigma of, if you do go to that counselor, well, then you should be fixed. If you went to the counselor, then you're good now, right? Like,
Oh my.
or if you're going to the counselor, then it's not a problem anymore. It's like, no. Just because I'm talking to someone does not mean that I'm better now. Just because I had just because I have someone helping me perform my surgery does not mean that the surgery is done.
And also too, sometimes it takes a while to find a counselor that clicks with you. I've had some not so great counselors, and I've also had amazing counselors. And it can be scary trying to find like a counselor that helps. I know, like, I go to see a counselor at the Huddle Broadway there, and definitely like connected with them, and I'm very grateful to have that connection, because I've had a counselor that was not great, like invalidating. They basically actually talking about physical and like mental health. I remember I was telling them I was at rock bottom, and they were like, I joked with my friends because they were saying how like I looked like put together, and that my beard was nice and trim. So I joked with my friends that, oh, my beard's so good, I can't be at rock bottom because I look too good. Like, when I heard it, I personally, I'm glad I knew it was like baloney. Like, what the heck are you? You're saying this, and you're like, you're a counselor, right? You're just So there's good and there's bad counselors out there, and it's like don't lose hope when you have like those negative experiences with counselors, but maybe try and see if you can connect with somebody else, because there's just like, you're who people are friends with aren't your best friends. You don't find a person you click with.
Don't be discouraged.
Yes.
It's completely normal to not like click with a counselor once in a while. That happens. We all have different experiences, personalities, different intersecting identities, like ideologies. It's normal, but yeah, don't be
It's
discouraged.
no different than finding a friend. You're not going to click with every stranger that comes down the street.
But there is one out there for you,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's also part of the bravery piece. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to both of you for being on the Let's Listen podcast today.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about this topic. I'm really glad that when I heard about the topic, I'm like, ooh, I have some things to share. Because I've dealt with some people saying like, oh, mental illness doesn't exist, and I'm like, I can't. I can't. Yeah.
Oh, well, I hope that means that you'll both be back on the podcast soon.
Of course.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.